everyone. Thank you for being here. We're actually going to do a little bit of engagement stuff. If you want to, you can pull out your phones or your laptops and join in with this info up here. Yes.
Important question, are these graded? Are these graded?
No, not at all. Not at all. And your answers will be totally anonymous. Right? So again, I'm from the Department of Educational Studies. I want to start off by asking, does anybody have any idea what the Educational Studies degrees are about? Or what we do?
I know it's in some school and like you're sort of like your teachers. That's all I know.
Yeah, so he said we talked about schooling and being certified to be a teacher. Other ideas? Okay, that's fine. Well, I'll be telling you a little bit more about what our school is about. And so I want to start off, just tell me what we're going to be talking about. I'm actually going to be introducing you to some terms. You may have talked about them before, you may have not, but those terms are social justice and equity. I'll be explaining why they matter across different educational and community contexts, and then how an educational studies major and degree can help you make some impactful changes on diverse communities. So, engagement time. So, I want to know, what are your ideas about social justice and equity? What terms come to mind? What have you heard about it? So I will just give you all a couple minutes to maybe chime in. Again, your answers will appear anonymously, so have no fear in what's going up there. No one will. Or you can just shout them out. So equity, equaling equality in society. Opportunities, distribution of wealth within society, within social terms, privileges, fairness. Okay, these are some good ideas. It is all jumbled up here. Giving wealth, justice and equality again, activism, equality among everyone. Okay, all right. So I see that some of you already have an idea about what what those terms mean, and so I'll go ahead and just give you all the definition according to Google. And this is the wrong screen. That's why. All right, so social justice is a term to describe the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society. So I saw a lot of those answers up there, which is great. I'm glad you all have been introduced to those terms, or even if you looked it up just now, that's totally fine. And so a little more on social justice is that some of the ideas center around human rights, again, equal distribution of resources, societal participation in change, and then creating access to opportunity and change through action. And so I have some examples of some injustices that we have in our communities and throughout the U.S. And these are some of the examples of where we see a lot of injustices that need to be addressed through social justice and equity. So voting laws. I know we've had some things recent in our country that had to do with county ballots. It was the governor's election in Atlanta and Florida. Did anybody hear about those mix-ups? Yeah. Law enforcement. Over the past couple years, there have been a couple law enforcement things that have to do with injustice, and so we asked, like, how do we navigate through these things, and what do we have to do to make change and kind of address these issues? The environment. Can anybody think about an environmental social injustice that might be going on? Flint, exactly. Flint, Michigan.
Also, I guess because of the pipeline.
Yeah, so Flint, Michigan, they still don't have clean water, but we do. It's an injustice for them not to have that. Healthcare, mandates, mandating people to have a certain insurance, or some people not even having access to health insurance. Education is an obvious one. Segregation, yes, it happened a while ago, but we don't even realize that sometimes today schools are still segregated. Maybe not intentionally, but it happens. And then lastly, there are social injustices that happen in the workplace all the time. So what are we doing to address these, and how do we get the information and knowledge we need to make sure that we are making change in the community? And so moving on, we're going to get into the word equity. So again, a lot of you said that equity has to do with equalness, and so there's a difference. So equality is a state of being the same versus equity, which is the state of being treated fairly. And fairness having to do with freedom from bias, dishonesty, or injustice. And so I have an example for you all. Just to put this into a better context, we have 3 trees up here. So we have a cactus, an orchid, and a lemon tree. So maybe in groups of 2 or 3, or your tables, I want you to discuss the following questions. What does each plant need to grow and thrive? How are these needs different? And what happens if we treat each plant the same? So go ahead and take a minute or two and discuss those questions, and we'll come back and share our words.
Have you since you spray water almost the time with my misted? Sometimes you put ice cubes. Yeah, you like it like spray water. Spray. That's the point of it.
We need to have like a basic plan and adapt it to the needs of each of the plants.
Exactly. Great answer, thank you. Anyone else? I heard a lot of conversation out there, don't be scared. Did anybody come up with the answer on what happens if we treat each plant the same?
Yeah, I was trying to answer that. If you give each plant the same amount of water, for example, like you give each plant the amount of water that a cactus will need, and you're actually going to do collections because they're not getting their food.
Yeah. So, if we were to say that these plants were people, when we're working with others, it makes a point that yes, everyone should be treated equally, but how do we make sure everyone also thrives or succeeds with that equal treatment? Does that mean we provide more resources to someone who needs it more than the other one, or do we just give everyone the same? Another question is, how do the needs of each plant change through the seasons? And that can be reflective of how we interact and how we serve people in our communities as well. And so, just thinking through, the first step to addressing social justice is knowing what equity is, and if we're able to keep equity in mind, we can make sure that we're meeting the needs of all the people that we're working with. And part of the educational studies degree is about educating others and allowing others to have the knowledge that they need to support the communities they work with, whether you're becoming a teacher and you're in a diverse classroom full of different students. All students have different levels of learning, or even if you're working in a community organization, you have all types of people coming in. And so what do we have to do to meet the needs of all of those people? That's equity. And so I have one more example that is a case study. So I'll read it and I want you all to talk about it. Answer the same questions like, what could the teacher have done differently? What could the reserve have done differently? And kind of just your thoughts and reflections on it. So a 6th grade teacher takes her class to a nature reserve for a science-based hike, believing that the reserve has accommodations for her new student, who uses crutches due to cerebral palsy. When the class arrives, they learn that the reserve's accommodations are underwhelming and they don't meet the needs of the student who's on crutches. So how was his experience impacted? How are the other kids' experiences impacted? And what could have been done differently to make sure that all the students had an opportunity to learn what they needed to in this instance? So take a minute to talk about it, and then we'll come back together as a group.
What exactly the nominations were
It's not necessarily.
Okay, so we're going to bring it back in. What did you all come up with?
Well, we were first talking about the teacher and how making that assumption of the recommendations is, that's just never the case. Not everything is recommendations, and there needs to be that extra step of going and checking, because then that student loses out on this incredible educational opportunity, and then the classmates lose out on bonding with their new student and empathizing with what they're going through, because the more time you spend with someone that doesn't, that is different than has other needs, the more you empathize with them. So there's just that whole thing. It's like a chain reaction.
Yes, thank you very much for that answer. So, Equality was inviting all the students on the field trip. But on the field trip, not all students had the same access to the learning experiences, and that's where equity comes in. And so we see that the teacher and the reserve kind of missed that opportunity to make the environment inclusive and equitable. And that also speaks to the privileges that the teacher and the people who run the reserve have, because they don't have mobility issues. So they might not think about what a student with a disability might have. Which brings me into one of my next points of our presentation and some more definitions that are good to know. Privilege, meaning a set of benefits given to people who fit into a specific social group based on their identities. So can you all provide some examples of identities that might privilege us where we don't recognize it when it comes to someone who's different than us? So disability was one that we just talked about. Can someone name another one?
Sexual orientation.
Sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, language, yes. Gender, race. Yeah, so those are all different types of identities that we all have, and we might not identify with one more than the other, which brings us to my next definition, which is intersectionality. The idea that multiple identities intersect to create a whole identity that's different from its individual components. So when we think about ourselves, me as an example, I think about myself as a woman first. Then I think about myself as an African American woman who is heterosexual. So all of these different identities make me go through a world seeing life in a certain aspect. So when we're working with other people, we want to keep their identities in mind as well if we're planning on helping them thrive and succeed. And then the last definition I want to talk about is oppression, which is the center of where social justice and equity came from. So oppression meaning unjust or cruel exercise of authority or power. And so when we see these things in our lives, it's important for us to become better community members and knowing how to address them. And the educational studies degree can really help us do that. But the main point of going over these terms was not to make anyone feel guilty, but it was really to raise your level of self-awareness about who you are. So not only is this learning about other people, but it's knowing about yourself as well. And if we know these terms and kind of things that are happening in the world, it will better prepare us to challenge, influence, and change systems of injustice. And then overall, just being well versed on these topics will help us be better community members and potential future leaders. We want our leaders to be thoughtful about what they're doing and who they're working with. And so it's important to know these terms. Does anyone have any questions or comments? All right, so I'm going to move on into what does equity, social justice, equity and social justice have to do with me, my degree? Well, social injustices are everywhere. They're local, national, international, so they don't stop wherever you might go. And again, sometimes these issues may consciously or unconsciously perpetuate oppression. So we may not even realize that some of these things are going on, but if you know this terminology, you might say, hey, this is weird. What do I do about this? So when you know about this stuff, it'll better help you prepare you. And then again, being a leader is going to be important for you to know these things. So a degree in Ed Studies can prepare you to respond in transformational ways. And then it's an interdisciplinary degree, so you have a lot of room to study different topics, the way that you see them and the way that you want them to correlate with your career. So this is our mission. It's pretty long, but we've bolded some of the most important aspects of the degree. Again, promoting social justice and equity, exploring issues in education, diversity, and then collaborating with local and global communities. And that's where being aware of who you are and others are comes into place. We have a couple different degrees. So the first one is the BA in Educational Studies. We have two concentrations that you can choose from. The first one is Educational Leadership, Policy, and Social Justice. And so with that degree, you would examine ways in which public and private organizations contribute to educational policy and impact social justice and leadership. And then the curriculum, instruction, and equity shows you approaches to learning and instruction in a variety of community settings, formal and informal settings. So there's a lot of different things you can do with those degrees. We'll get a little more into that later. And then of course, we have our elementary education teaching option where you can become a certified teacher within the state of Washington. We also have a post-baccalaureate program that offers teaching certification. So say if you want to study math, or major in biology and later on you decide you want to become a teacher, you can do that and you can be specialized in a subject already with your bachelor's degree. The post-bac program is only 1 year, so it'll be just like doing a 5th year. And then lastly, we have 3 different minors. Minors go along great with any degree, especially the diversity minor. Our country is continually becoming more and more diverse, so that's a really good one to have on your resume. We have a teaching and learning minor, and then education and society minor. So again, we have a lot of options for you to choose from. If you're interested, we'd be happy to talk to you more about those things. These are some of the career opportunities that you can have. It's a humongous list. And a lot of people, again, when I asked you at the beginning of the presentation, what do you think educational studies does? And these are all different types of things that you can go into with the degrees. Curriculum design is not only for schools, hospitals. They have education courses where they educate their patients. And so there are entire programs, especially at children's hospitals. Student counseling is a great option. You can get a degree in education and not be involved in the school. There are plenty of community organizations that value folks with educational studies degrees. So it's a great way to go if you're interested. So final thoughts. Equitable educators and citizens in these jobs are proficient not only with cultural knowledge, but with the knowledge and skills to ensure justice and advocate for equity. And so that concludes my presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Would you say competitive candidate for the major?
What was that?
What would you say competitive candidate for the major?
A competitive candidate for the major? Well, we do care about GPA, that's good. But if you show that you're passionate, everyone is welcome. The educational studies degree only requires 45 credits in a composition course. Whereas if you are interested in becoming a teacher, there is an application process where students are looked at holistically. So there's an essay portion to the application. There are some tests that are required by the state here called the West E test. And there's a bunch of other requirements for the teacher certification program, but if you meet with an advisor, we can explain more about that. Other questions? Okay, thank you for listening. If you're interested in the major, take one.